You've been exposed for too long, bleeding in rooms that only wanted to watch, explaining yourself to people who never cared to understand, reacting to a world that profits from your pain. But something inside you changed, didn't it? You stopped talking. You started observing. You felt the cold. And instead of running from it, you stayed. You didn't ask for strength. You became it. Not through noise, but through stillness. Not through comfort, but through calculated suffering. That's the truth Nietzsche saw beneath all masks. That the man who can hold his chaos in silence becomes untouchable. Not because he has no pain, but because no one sees where it lives. This isn't self-help. This is self-weaponization. If you're ready to be unreadable, to stop leaking and start leading, then step into the dark. And remember, a man who cannot be moved, cannot be broken. That quiet unrest behind your eyes when the world goes still. It's not anxiety. It's not weakness. It's war. A war you never declared, but one that started the moment you first flinched in front of the wrong eyes. This war doesn't come with bullets. It comes with birthdays you were forgotten, with fake smiles, with apologies that never came, with the memory of being laughed at when you were honest, of being called too much when you were vulnerable. They told you to open up, to be real, to express your truth. And so you did, not knowing that in the jungle of men, bleeding in public only draws predators. Because here's the truth they never warned you about. This world does not reward exposure. It devours it. You are not weak. You are untrained, sent to battle without armor, told to lead with your heart, as if this game isn't rigged for the cold. Modern life has sold you softness as virtue. It taught you to explain every bruise, label every scar, therapize your way out of the fire. But men like Nietzsche, men who knew, warned us of this moral decay, that to feel everything, to confess everything, is to die before you've even sharpened your sword. What if silence isn't repression? What if silence is strategy? There's power in not speaking, a strength in being unreadable. They can't hurt what they can't locate. You see, pain is not meant to be shared freely. Pain is a private forge. Some wounds are not meant to be healed. They are meant to be remembered. Because fire, held long enough, becomes steel. And that's where the transformation begins. Not with more talking, not with more explaining, but with less. When you stop asking for closure, when you stop broadcasting your wounds like you're begging for a nurse, you start building your own armor. In silence, in solitude, in the shadow. This is where the man splits into two. The one who bleeds publicly, and the one who learns to cauterize in the dark. From this point on, you don't spill. You store. You create the fire ledger, a mental log, a silent record. Every betrayal, every lie, every time someone mistook your kindness for softness. Not to whine, not to seek revenge, but to remember. Because memory is weaponry. Each entry in the ledger is a coal. You don't toss it, you carry it. And over time, that fire does something alchemical. It doesn't burn you, it builds you. You become colder, sharper, less reactive, more precise. Your words become fewer, but heavier. Your presence becomes quieter, but more commanding. You don't owe the world your emotions. You owe yourself control. Because real strength isn't in how loud you can cry. It's in how much you can carry without making a sound. You are not here to be understood. You are here to become undeniable. They don't need to get you. They need to feel you. And they will. Not because you shouted, but because you stared back with the calm eyes of a man who's already buried 1,000 versions of himself and didn't flinch. So the next time the war rises up in your chest, don't run, don't explain, don't reach for validation. Stand still, take inventory, write it in the fire. Because the man who holds the fire becomes the forge, and the forge never forgets. But real control begins where motion ends. Not the motion of the body, but the motion of the mind, the twitch of the ego, the flinch of insecurity, the restless need to speak, to prove, to respond. Every reaction you give is currency spent, and most of us are broke, emotionally bankrupt, overdrawn by years of bleeding energy into arguments that didn't matter, into people who didn't listen. You ever notice that? How quick you are to explain yourself, to defend, to fire back when your pride is even slightly grazed? That's not strength, that's addiction. The addiction to being seen, to being right, to being understood. But a man at war with himself needs to stop seeking applause from the battlefield. Stillness isn't silence, it's strategy. Nietzsche said it. Stillness is not natural, it's earned. Forged through a kind of inner domination that most men will never touch. The world pushes, and you don't move. Not because you're frozen, but because you've decided that not all storms deserve your thunder. You want to know what real power feels like? It's not shouting, it's not showing off. It's sitting in a room full of chaos and choosing stillness, not numbness, not apathy, conscious neutrality. It's not that you don't care. It's that you choose not to bleed for what doesn't earn your blood. Every time you react, you hand over a piece of yourself. And over time, those little pieces, they add up, until there's nothing left but a man who's been carved hollow by every opinion, every insult, every trigger. So you build a frame. Call it the silent frame, a mental perimeter, a border between you and chaos. 3 seconds. That's all you need. Before you speak, before you answer, before you retaliate. Pause. You let the heat rise and then you let it pass. No movement, no reaction, no surrender. You want to reset your dominance in real time? 3 seconds. That's where kings breathe. That's where tacticians live. In the delay. Because the first to flinch is rarely the strongest. Stillness is control. And control is what most men lose the moment they open their mouths. You've been conditioned to respond instantly. Every beep, every message, every insult. Jump, bark, defend. But when you stop chasing, when you stop proving, something inside you sharpens. You become the eye of the storm, unmoving, focused, terrifying in your calm. Because stillness tells them, I could respond, I could destroy, but I won't. Not now, not like this. That's not passivity, that's power. You don't flinch when insulted. You don't rush to correct a misunderstanding. You don't explain your silence. Because a man who owns his frame doesn't trade it for noise. The next time you feel that itch to react, stop, breathe, look them in the eye, and don't move. You'll feel the chaos pulling at your chest. The urge to bite back. Let it come, let it rise, then let it burn out. Because the fire that doesn't consume you tempers you. Stillness is not the absence of power. It is the presence of mastery. And the man who can stand still can make the whole world wait. They'll misunderstand you. Let them. That's the game most men never learn to play. They're too busy correcting, too eager to clarify, too addicted to being seen accurately. But accuracy is not power. Mystery is. When you show nothing, people fill the silence with their own fears, their own insecurities, their own stories. And that is leverage. The man who reveals nothing becomes a mirror, not a mask, not a liar, a mirror, silent, reflective, deadly. They speak to you, but hear themselves echoing back. They accuse, but the guilt they feel is their own. They wonder what you're thinking, and in that wondering they start to unravel. Most men wear their identities like neon signs. They explain, they justify, they beg to be understood. But a man who needs to be understood is a man already kneeling. Understand this. When you live in psychological opacity, when you learn to be unreadable without being disconnected, you become untouchable. Because they can't prepare for what they can't predict. They call it aloof. They call it arrogant. They call it distant. Let them. Because every label they use reveals them, not you. That's the mirror effect. It's not deception, it's restraint. You give them the silence, and they give you their truth, their assumptions, their fears, their unresolved wounds. They project, you observe, they speak, you study. And while they're busy reacting to the ghost of who they think you are, you move like a shadow, unseen, unmapped, unmatched. This is not about playing games. This is about owning the frame. Because the loudest man in the room is rarely the one in control, the one explaining himself, defending his motives, trying to make you see his real heart. He's already lost the throne. But the man who can sit in silence while being misread, the man who can let the world misunderstand him without blinking, he is not weak, he is sovereign. Stillness is control. Ambiguity is armor. And while they scramble to define you, to decode you, to pull some reaction from your stone-faced gaze, you wait, you calculate, you conserve. Because every time you're misread, the field tips in your favor. They're no longer watching you. They're watching a version of you they invented. And that version is a lie. Which means they're playing chess with a phantom. That is power. So don't correct them. Don't clean the mirror. Let them see what they see. Let them misunderstand. Let them tremble at shadows they created. Because in a world obsessed with broadcasting, the man who holds his tongue commands attention. In a world full of open books, the man who's a riddle becomes legend. You are not here to be explained. You are not here to be liked. You are here to become unforgettable. So let the mask of mystery stay on. Let the silence do the talking. And the next time they ask, what are you thinking? Say nothing. Because a man who can be misunderstood and still remain calm is a man no one can truly conquer. They'll tell you to share it, to open up, to let it out. But they don't say what happens next. They don't talk about the weight that never leaves, the eyes that change once you bleed in front of them, the quiet judgment behind the sympathy, the power you lose once you hand them your pain like a confession. Every scar you reveal becomes a roadmap, a map to your weakness, your soft spots, your fault lines. And in the hands of the wrong person, that map becomes a weapon. You think you're healing.
but you're selling pieces of your story to strangers. For what? A moment of relief? A pat on the back? You were told it makes you brave, but Nietzsche called it what it really is: moral weakness disguised as virtue. Not healing. Performance. The world is not a sanctuary. It's an arena. And in an arena, pain is not something you share. It's something you sharpen. You don't hand it out. You hold it. You don't post it. You forge it. That's where the shadow ledger begins. Not a diary. Not a cry for help. But a war journal. Brutal. Private. Unfiltered. A place where the mask drops and the real voice rises. Not for anyone else. Just for you. Every betrayal. Every heartbreak. Every humiliation that still echoes. Write it. Not to be heard, but to see clearly. To understand the patterns. To mark the battles. This ledger isn't a graveyard. It's a blueprint. Because your pain is data. And data becomes strategy. You don't escape it. You study it. You don't vent it. You weaponize it. Men who constantly share their suffering are asking the world to carry them. But the world has no hands for that. Only knives. So stop performing. Stop trying to be seen in your suffering. It's not meant for that. It's not a brand. It's not an identity. It's a forge. The deeper the cut, the hotter the fire. And the man who stays in that fire, silent, focused, resolved. He doesn't come out broken. He comes out forged. You don't need applause. You need alchemy. Your worst days aren't your enemies. They're your raw materials, but only if you keep them to yourself. Not to hide, but to build. In silence, in solitude, in the dark where no one claps, no one cheers, and no one knows what you're becoming. That's real transformation. That's real power. Pain that is never seen becomes power no one can predict. Because when no one knows what broke you, no one can prepare for what you've built in the ruins. And when they come for you, as they always do, they'll bring swords meant for the man you used to be. But you'll be something else, something they never saw coming. So the next time you feel the urge to speak your wounds into the air, don't. Write it, bury it, forge it. Because your pain is not for sale. It's your shadow. And your shadow is not weak. It's waiting for you to become a man dark enough to wield it. They think silence means you have nothing to say. Let them. Because a man who watches more than he speaks isn't empty. He's calculating. There's a quiet violence in that kind of stillness, a discipline most men never develop. They're too addicted to the sound of their own voice, too restless to sit with tension, too uncomfortable to let silence win. But the strategist, the true strategist, watches longer. He doesn't rush into rooms trying to dominate with noise. He enters like a shadow, observes like a wolf, waits like a storm just below the horizon. He speaks last, not because he's weak, but because he's listening, mapping the field, noting every tick, every twitch, every verbal stumble from those too eager to fill the air with unfiltered thought. That's the paradox of power. The loudest man may win the room for a moment, but the one who sees, owns it. Most men lack that patience. They chase immediacy. They confuse urgency with importance. But urgency is a cheap drug. It makes you act before you're ready. It makes you respond before you understand. And those who move too soon die first. You don't draw your sword until you know where the weakness is. You don't play your move until you've studied the board, until you've watched every piece tremble under pressure. The predator doesn't chase every noise in the forest. He waits. He watches. He stalks the pattern. And when he strikes, he doesn't miss. That's predator patience. Speaking last. Pausing longer. Watching until the ones who need to be seen reveal who they really are. Because they always do. Give people long enough. They show you everything. Their ego. Their fear. Their cracks. You just have to be still enough to see it. But that's the hard part, isn't it? Sitting with the urge to respond. Feeling the fire rise in your chest. That need to prove, to correct, to assert. And doing nothing. That's not passivity. That's war. Waged in restraint. You're not disengaged. You're preparing. Because power doesn't come from being right. It comes from being ready. And readiness starts with the eyes. With attention so sharp it cuts through the mask people wear. You'll start noticing things others miss. The hesitation in their voice. The flicker of uncertainty. The false confidence held together with borrowed words. You won't need to interrogate. They'll hand you everything. You just have to let them talk long enough to betray themselves. The strategist watches longer. Because he's not here to be part of the noise. He's here to outlast it. Most of what you need to win will be handed to you by people who don't know how to shut up, how to wait, how to watch. They act fast. They burn out. They fall into traps they built with their own mouths. And when they do, you're already 10 steps ahead. Because you never moved. You just watched. You just waited. So hold the line. Delay your voice. Store your instinct to speak in a vault of steel. Let the noise collapse on itself. Let the world rush past you. Because the man who sees before he speaks never has to repeat himself. There's a place most men run from. A place with no sound, no praise, no applause, just the mirror, and the echo of your own breath. It's not punishment. It's the forge. The cold place where identity is not handed to you. It's carved. In silence. In solitude. In suffering no one sees. You think you're alone. Unseen. Unvalued. But you're not lost. You're becoming. Most men fear that quiet. They mistake solitude for exile. They think no one watching means nothing is happening. But real strength is built in the shadows, not the spotlight. There's no crowd in the cave. No cheer for consistency. No validation when you show up tired, sore, and half-broken and do it anyway. This is where the dark training regimen begins. And it's not glamorous. It's not shareable. It's not made for likes. Cold showers. Handwritten pages that no one reads. Routines executed in the dark while the world sleeps. Silence so thick it starts speaking to you in the voice of your former self, daring you to quit. This is where most men tap out. Because there's no dopamine in discipline. No audience in the abyss. But Nietzsche understood. Solitude isn't loneliness. It's confrontation. Not with the world. With yourself. The weak man runs from that confrontation. He needs distraction. Noise. Someone to listen. Someone to see him struggle and say, you're doing great. But you're not here for sympathy. You're here for sharpness. To become something no one saw coming. Something built in silence. Something lethal. Precise. Unshakable. This is the ghost phase. Where you vanish from the world not to disappear, but to rebuild. Not to be missed, but to become undeniable. The habits you form here, they don't just change your schedule. They harden your identity. You journal not to vent, but to document war strategies. You shower cold to remember that comfort is a thief. You wake early not because it's productive, but because most battles are won before the enemy even rises. And you don't speak unless it's necessary, because your voice is no longer for decoration. It's a weapon. This is the grind that gives nothing, until it gives everything. Not right away, not on your timeline, but in ways no one can take away from you. You'll come out of this season different, sharper, colder, less interested in being understood, and more focused on being undeniable. Because if you can build in isolation, if you can keep showing up with no audience, no recognition, no one clapping, then the world has nothing it can hold over you. You won't need attention. You won't need validation. You'll walk into every room already knowing who you are, because you met him in the dark, and you built him with your bare hands. So when the loneliness comes, when the silence wraps around you like winter, don't run. Stand in it, train in it, let it strip you down to bone and rebuild you from the inside out. Because the man who becomes dangerous in solitude never needs the world again. You are not numb. You were never numb. You just never learned how to contain. Because somewhere along the way they told you that to feel deeply, you had to bleed publicly. That real emotion meant reaction, expression, performance. But that's not strength. That's volatility dressed as honesty. Feeling everything doesn't mean showing everything. Pain isn't purified by exposure. It's sharpened in silence. You think your rage makes you real? That your tears make you brave? No. It's not the fire that lashes out that makes a man strong. It's the fire that hardens. You're not supposed to suppress it. You're supposed to hold it. Like a soldier gripping his weapon in the dark. Like a wolf crouching behind the tree line. Still. Loaded. Ready. But not desperate to fire. This is emotional armor. Not denial. Not detachment. Domination. Because when a man can feel everything but show nothing, he becomes unreadable. And when you're unreadable, you're untouchable. The enemy doesn't fear your noise. He fears your control. Your refusal to break when the pressure spikes. Your silence when the insult lands. Your still eyes when they expect chaos. Because there's a tension in that calm. A quiet violence. They know something's happening inside you, but they don't know what. And that unknown is power. This is where you stop reacting like a wounded boy and start responding like a chess player. 3 moves ahead. Emotion under control. Pulse steady. You don't panic. You calculate. Every insult, every betrayal, every trigger they hand you becomes practice. That's the drill. Internal rehearsal. Replay the moment. The sting. The heat behind your ribs. Then run it again. But this time, no flinch. No fire. No hand raised. No voice raised. Just the presence of a man who feels, but is not owned by what he feels. You sit with the tension. You let it cook inside your chest. You let it mold your restraint like iron in the forge. Because every moment you don't react, you build something. A frame. A boundary. A barrier between what touches you and what controls you. This isn't about being cold. It's about being in command. Because the storm still hits you. The blood still pulses. The emotion still screams beneath your skin. But you don't flinch. You don't explain. You don't ask the world to understand you. You let them think what they want. You let them see the silence, not knowing that beneath it, a war is raging. And you're winning. Quietly. Because the man who can feel everything, but show nothing, is the man no one can prepare for. He's not fragile. He's not loud. He's not desperate to be seen. He is contained. He is forged. And he is coming. Not with fire, but with precision. Because emotional stillness isn't absence. It's the final form of control. And if you can hold the storm inside without spilling a single drop, you don't need to prove anything. You've already become everything they fear. When you explained your silence, softened your presence, diluted your power so they wouldn't feel too small standing next to it. But now, you know better. The man who can be labeled can be controlled. And the man who explains himself has already given something away. So you learn to move without commentary, to enter a room without permission, to speak with your presence, not your voice. You become less of a statement and more of a question, something they can't quite place, can't predict, can't prepare for. You become unreadable, not because you're hiding, but because you've stopped broadcasting. You've stopped performing, stopped asking to be seen, stopped translating your value into something they'll applaud. And in that silence, you find something sharper than noise. Wait, because the man who needs nothing moves like a storm that's already been paid for. They feel you before they hear you. They watch you longer than they admit. They talk about you when you're gone, not because you entertained them, but because they couldn't decode you. And that unsettles them. Because most people are puzzles solved in a sentence, open books screaming for readers. But you're a locked vault. You don't need to intimidate. You exist. That's enough. This is presence without permission. It's not arrogance. It's absence of need. You no longer chase significance. You embody it. And when they try to define you, they run into their own confusion. They throw old labels at you. None of them stick. They expect reaction. It never comes. They ask what's his deal, and all they get is silence. That's the game. You don't win by being understood. You win by being felt. No approval, no applause, no validation. Just that tension you bring with you. That feeling that something is happening beneath the surface. But no one knows what. No one knows when. Because the man who sees all and says little is the one the world keeps watching. That's power. That's dominance. And it can't be taught. It's forged. In solitude. In restraint. In the decision to never explain yourself again. So when you walk into a room, don't announce. Don't perform. Don't ask to be understood. Just be there. Let the silence hang. Let the uncertainty build. Let them squirm under the weight of their own assumptions. You are not here to be solved. You are here to be reckoned with. Because the most dangerous man in any room is the one no one can answer. A silence that tastes like steel. A stillness that hums like a blade left in the snow too long. That's the place you're in now. The final stretch of the path they never talk about. Not in the books. Not in the noise. Not in the mouths of men who've never walked it. You've been forged in fire. Sharpened by solitude. Made unreadable by your silence. But this is where the real test begins. Because anyone can hold the line when it's easy. When the noise is low. When the trigger hasn't been pulled. But what happens when the heat returns? When the insult lands clean? When the betrayal cuts deeper than expected? Can you still hold? Can you stay cold? Can you rule yourself when everything in you wants to burn the room down? That's the cold crown. Not gold. Not applause. Not external power. Internal command. A sovereignty no one gave you, and no one can take. Because you earned it in the war beneath your skin. This isn't about becoming numb. It's about becoming still. A man who feels everything, but is moved by nothing. No reaction. No explanation. No exposure. Only presence. Only discipline. Only restraint. This is the man who doesn't just play the game. He designs it. Because while others swing swords, he watches. While others shout, he waits. While others crumble under emotion, he builds inside of it. You've been taught to flinch, to defend, to explain. But the cold crown demands a higher law, a deeper code, one that doesn't flinch, doesn't blink, doesn't need the world to get it. You don't ask to be understood. You ask yourself, am I in command? Not of others, of me, of the storm that rises, of the boy who still wants to scream, of the man who knows he could destroy but chooses not to. That's not suppression. That's sovereignty. That's the throne no one sees but everyone feels. And it's heavy. It should be. This crown is cold because it doesn't warm itself in comfort. It doesn't bend for emotion. It doesn't shine in the spotlight. It glows in silence. In the moments no one sees. In the pauses that make men uncomfortable. You want to test your power. Live 1 week by this rule. No reaction. No explanation. No exposure. Not because you're hiding, but because you've nothing to prove. Feel everything. React to nothing. And when they push, you don't push back. You hold. Not because you're afraid, but because you're the one still holding the line. And in a world full of men who break under pressure, you become the one thing they cannot move. You become the edge, the ghost,
the king without a throne. Because when you no longer need the crown, you've earned it. Not made of gold, but of silence, of patience, of power. The cold crown. And once it's on your head, nothing and no one can take it from you.